Hello students and welcome to the automobile engine class. Myself Shankho Ghosh, Assistant Professor of Automobile Engineering Department at Dr. Sudhir Chandrasur Degree Engineering College under the JIS group. So students, in the last few classes we are already started the discussion of the module number 2. The module number 2 is basically covered the constructional features, function and the working of the automobile engine components. So here in this module, as an automobile engine components, we are already discussed the cylinder block and pistons. Now today from this class we started the discussion on the connecting rod and crankshaft. So students, let's start the today's class, which is totally based on the connecting rod and the crankshaft. Sorry. So let's start the class with the connecting rod. Basically, connecting rod is a rod which connect the piston and the crankshaft in between the cylinder block. So this connecting rod are basically a part of engine which connect the piston and the crankshaft. The main function of the connecting rod is the main function of the connecting rod is that when the piston are pushed downwards, when the piston push the downwards by the explosive forces in the combustion chamber, then the connecting rod transmit the downward motion. Then the connecting rod transmit the downward motion to the crankshaft and causing it to the turn. Since the piston moves vertically while the crankshaft rotates, the connecting rods are basically subject to a combination of the axle. Means the axle means the compressive and the pulling. Both the axles, and beside the axle they are obviously they are also combined with the bending forces. So this connecting rod, beside this connect the piston with the crankshaft, they also convert the reciprocating motions of the pistons into the rotary motions of the crankshaft. So these are basically helps to passing through the or transfer the or permit the passage or allow the pass for the power which is produced in the combustion chamber to the crankshaft. So this is the basic things of the connecting rod. Here students, you can find out the various main components of the connecting rod. So this one is called as the small end of the connecting rod, and this one is called the big end of the connecting rod. Here is the I section types of connecting rods are available. Here in this small end connecting rod, small ends of these connecting rods are fitted with the bushing rod or the piston rod, and here are the piston rod bolts and rod nut and the rod caps are also available. So after knowing the basics of the connecting rod, now coming to the construction of the connecting rod. Here in the construction of the connecting rod, we find that this connecting rod are basically consist of three main things. First one is the big end, second one is the rod section, and third one is the small end. So with these three main components, three main parts these components are basically consistent. So here is the pistons, here is the small end, here is the rod section, and this one is the big end. And in the small end, wrist pin or piston pins or the gudgeon pin are fitted here, and in between the big end, the crank pin or the crankshafts are or or crankshafts are fitted here, and these portions are divided into the two parts, half end and another half end. The another half end, which is totally separated from this connecting rod, are called as a rod cap, connecting rod cap, and this one is called as the big end. So and this, when the big end and the rod cap are assembled, that time they here use some kinds of bearing inside, and that is also used as a half portion for the big end side, and another half portion is used for the rod cap side. And the both these parts, big end section and the rod cap section, are tightened with the help of the rod bolt and the rod nut. So these are the basic construction of the connecting rod. So here the connecting rod can rotate. That this connecting rod can rotate at the both the end. First one, both the end, between the small end and as well as the big end. Small end and the both big end. So a connecting rod, that the angle, there is an angle in between the connecting rod and the piston that can change as the rod moves. So there is an angle in between the connecting rod and the piston that helps the rod moves up and down and rotates around the crankshaft. So for that purpose, it has some angle. Basically, so students, we know that the connecting rod are fitted on within the piston with the help of a gudgeon pin or the piston pin. So as the piston moves, reciprocating movement, so that time there is some reciprocating movement. There are ups and down movement are also available in this connecting rod, but this connecting rod's big ends is also connected with the crank pin or the crankshaft, and that time the crankshaft is rotate, movement is the rotary motion. So as the crankshaft is rotate, the connecting rod is also rotate. So that's why the connecting rod fitted on the piston with some at an angle. That's why it moves in so smoothly. Now coming to the, there is a pinhole bored through the bearing on the big end. There is a pinhole bored through the bearing on the big end of the connecting rod, and here is a pinhole bored through this bearing, bored through this bearing on this big end of the connecting rod for the purpose of the lubricant oil squirt out onto the thrust side of the cylinder wall to lubricate the travel of the piston and the piston rings. So here you can see in this picture there is a pinhole and there is also a pinhole are there. So within this hole the lubrication oils are passes, and when as this small end connected with the piston pin, so when the lubrication are oils is squirt from the piston pin, so that will help the smooth, that will help the lubricate the that will help the lubrication of the cylinder wall. So these are the basic construction of this connecting rod. Now coming to the material is required for the connecting rod manufacturing. Now in mass productions in automobile engines, now in a mass production of the automobile engine, the connecting rods are also we need to the mass production producted component. So this is basically sorry this is basically made of the steel. These connecting rods are basically made of with the made with the made up with the steel. Its high performance of applications, thus because of its high performance of the application, the billet type connecting rod can be used. The billet type connecting rods are can be used, which are machined out of the solid brittle of metal, which is machined machined out a solid which is machined out of a solid billet material rather than being a cast or the forged. So here are the various types of connecting rods are showing in these pictures. So the besides this steel the connecting rod are used the die forged methods for the production of the connecting rod. It used basically the die forged methods from the special types of steel such as nickel chrome steel, and the chrome molybdenum steel. So these are the steels are basically used. These two types of steel, nickel chromium steel and molybdenum steel, are basically used as a material of the manufacturing material of the connecting rod, just because of its high strength. So besides these types of steel, there are aluminium is also, or alloy aluminum is also used as in connecting rods material. Here you can see in this you can see in this picture, this one is as a this one is a connecting rod which is made by a aluminum alloy, which is known as the T62024 aluminum alloy or T651 7075 aluminum alloy. These are used for the lightness and the ability of the highly absorb impact at the expense at the expense of the durability. So these are the materials which is used in the connecting rod. And beside the aluminium, the titanium is also used as a material. The titanium is also used as a material of the connecting rod, just because of it is more expensive and it reduces the weight also. So the cast iron or the cheaper, the lower performance applicators such as the motor scooter. So these are the still here we covered the constructional features, functions, and the working of this connecting rod. Now we are start the discussion of the crankshaft. Basically, the crankshaft is a shaft. Crankshaft is a shaft which transmit the power, which basically used to transmit the power which is developed by the engine to the various part of the vehicle. So these kinds of connecting rods. So this connecting rods is a link in between the input and the output of the vehicle. Without the crankshaft, our vehicle would not even move an inch, so your engine will be running. If our engine is in a good in running condition, but there is no crankshaft, or the crankshaft is not in good is the crankshaft is the or the crankshaft is broken, so that time the power cannot be the the power cannot be reached to the transmission section. As the power does not reach the transmission section, the vehicle cannot move. So that's why this connection link, or this shaft is called as the input and output shafts of the vehicle. Now coming to the functions of the crankshaft. Now coming to the functions of the crankshaft. The crankshaft is basically used to convert the reciprocating motion of the piston into the rotary motion. So as the power is produced inside the combustion chamber, and that time piston is moves only ups and down, which is called the reciprocating movement. So these types of movement, the movement and power is produced, and that types of power or this type of motion is converted into the rotary motions of this. Rotary motion is the main function of this crankshaft, and it is also drive the many of the other components like the oil pump, the water pump, alternator, air conditioning compressor, etc. Since the crankshaft needs to rotate at the high speed, since the crankshaft is rotate at a high speed under the heavy load, therefore it should have following the some good quality. Here the good quality means it must have the good strength, good stiffness, and it need to have good wear resistance. And besides this, it must have to the static and the dynamic balance, and which is also able to able to rotate smoothly. So these are the main functions of the crankshaft which I required. So for that purpose we use basically the chrome, nickel, molybdenum, steel. That's why we use the chrome, nickel, molybdenum, steel as a material of the crankshafts. We use as a material of the crankshaft. So after knowing the function and the material which is used in the crankshaft, now coming to the types of crankshaft. There are basically 4 types of crankshafts are available in this automobile sector. Those are, first one is the single throw crankshaft. Second one is double throw crankshaft. Third one is the 4 throw crankshaft, and number 4 is the 6 throw crankshaft. Here the single throw means, here this is the pictures of a single throw crankshaft, because here in this single throw crankshaft there is a one crank pin. As it has an one crank pin, as it has the one crank pin, that means here one piston or single piston has been fitted. When the crankshaft has the double throw crankshaft, here is the double throw crankshaft. Here we use the double cylinder, fitted the double cylinder engine. And as we are talking about the 4-throw crankshaft, that means it has a 4 crank pin which is connect the 4 connecting rod as well as 4 piston. So that's why it has a 4 cylinder engine. And when we are talking about the 6-throw crankshaft, that means it has a 6 types number of nose of crank pin, and where 6 connecting rod and as well as the 6 pistons are fitted. So that's why it has a 6 cylinder engine. When we are talking about the single cylinder engine, that means it has a single throw crankshaft. When we are talking about the double cylinder engine, that time we are talking about the double throw crankshaft. When we are talking about the 4 cylinder engine, that time it has the 4 throw crankshaft. And when we are talking about the 6 cylinder engine, that means it has 6 throw crankshaft. So these are the basic types of the crankshaft. Now coming to the parts of the crankshaft. Student, as you can see in this picture, this portion is called as a crank nose or the crank pulley, which is vibrated damper mounted portion. This second slot is called the mount for the camshaft drive sprocket. So here is the camshaft drive sprockets are fitted here, and this portion is called the main journal. This one is called as a main journal, and here is a small holes are available here. So this is called the main journal oil way to lube the crank pin journal. So this oil hole are basically inclined way are available, which is connected with these crank pins. Now coming to the next part, this one is called the counterweight section. Here is called the wave. This one is called the another main journal. So there is, as the cylinder has number of crank pin journal, which that is called 1, 2, 3 and 4. So it is a 4-throw crankshaft. So that's why it has a 4 crank pin journal. As it has the 4 crank pin journal, it has also 1, 2, 3 and 4 main bearing journal. So in a 4-cylinder engine, as there has a number of 4 engine cylinder, so besides that it has also 4 numbers of crank pin as well as the 4 number of main bearing. And at the rear end of this crankshaft are some kind of flange mounted looks are available, which is fit, and that portion flywheel has been mounted. And flywheel mounted on that flywheel mounting flange portion. Now coming to the just describe these parts here. The wave sections are basically a portion of the crank in between the crank pin. The wave sections are a portion which is specifically placed in between the crank pin and the cam shaft. The crank pin and the cam shaft and the crank pin and the shaft are between the two adjacent crank pin. The portion is called as a wave. The counterweight, which is designed to offset or the balance the movement of inertia effect when the of a heavy piston or the connecting rod moving in the both the rotational and the reciprocating motions. Now coming to the another point, that is called the crank journal. Here the crank journal is means this is when in case of reciprocating engine, the crank pins also called as the crank journal. As you can see in this picture, these ones are the crank pin. This one is a crank pin 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there is a 4 number of crank pin. So these crank pins are also called as a crank journal. And now next component, important component, that is the main bearing. It is in piston, in case of piston engine, the main bearing are the bearing on which the crankshaft are rotated. So that then for that purpose they are using a that purpose they using some kinds of bearing which is called the main bearing. And one more thing, one throw of the crankshaft means two numbers of waves, and one crank pin are called a one throw. As we called our when we are talking about the classification of the crankshaft, that time we are talking the single throw, double throw, four throw or six throw. Here the throw means two wave and one pin are together called as a throw. So students, here today in this class we discuss about the various things of the connecting rod and the crankshaft. In the next class we started the another topic. So still then, stay at home and stay safe. Thank you so much students. Thank you very much.